Epstein Island, a documentary chronicling the sins committed by a single individual who compelled the entire world to take notice. Would you believe me if I told you that? Rather than merely watching this documentary from the comfort of my home, like any other ordinary viewer, I actually witnessed these events firsthand. My name is Kayla. I worked on Epstein Island for 17 days. At the end of those 17 days, I had to risk my very life just to escape that island. This is my testimony. This incident took place many years ago. At that time, I was in dire need of money. I was drowning in debt. I certainly required a substantial sum. That was when this opportunity came my way, purely by chance. It was not something I had planned. It happened quite accidentally. Through a friend of my uncle, I received an opportunity to work on Epstein Island. Initially, I hesitated significantly, given that it was a remote and distant island. However, the salary they offered effectively paralyzed my ability to think rationally. They drafted a contract for a duration ranging from 1 to 2 months. Yet the salary they proposed for those 2 months was an amount I could not have earned even if I had toiled relentlessly for 5 years, or perhaps even longer. They drew up a contract offering me a salary of such magnitude. My desperate financial need prevented me from looking ahead or considering the potential consequences of my actions. Consequently, I agreed to take the job. However, to secure this job, I didn't have to go through any extensive interview process. It was a very simple, straightforward interview. Once my employment was confirmed, they instructed me to report to a specific location. At that site, numerous helicopters were poised for takeoff. They directed me to board one of them. However, as I was boarding, they subjected me to a peculiar procedure. They stamped a unique symbol onto my body before allowing me onto the aircraft. Everyone on board appeared quite comfortable, yet at the same time, they seemed rather peculiar. No one there spoke a single word. Consequently, I took the initiative to strike up a conversation with the person sitting next to me. I asked, "Are you also heading to the island for work?" In response, they simply turned toward me and offered a look of profound pity. What they said next left me completely shocked. "I have been working on this island for 5 years now," they explained. "It requires only 2 months of work per year, yet they provide a settlement package worth $1 million. Therefore, if you intend to work here on a long-term basis, let me offer you just one piece of advice. Do not speak to anyone. No matter what happens, do not make a big deal out of it." After that exchange, no one uttered another word. The silence that ensued felt incredibly uncomfortable to me. After traveling for some time, we finally arrived at the island. It was a small island, specifically an island capable of supporting a population of about 20,000 people. Yet when I was told that this entire, sizable island was actually privately owned, I simply could not believe it. When I considered the fact that someone had purchased such a massive island for a mere pittance, I found myself pondering just how immense their wealth, assets, and power must be. After everyone had disembarked on the island, our eyes were blindfolded, and we were ushered into a car. Following a journey of nearly half an hour, the vehicle pulled up to a grand mansion. As soon as we entered that massive mansion, we were issued uniforms and immediately instructed to change into them. Within a very short span of time, a large number of visitors began arriving at the mansion. Every single person who arrived was a figure of great historical significance. However, this did not strike me as a particularly remarkable occurrence. Given that they had gone so far as to purchase an entire private island to house such a colossal mansion, I had already surmised that this was, without a doubt, a place exclusively for the wealthy. They were paying me a generous salary. Consequently, nothing else seemed to matter much to me. It was my first day on the job. I was assigned to work in the kitchen as a general assistant. They handed me several cuts of meat and instructed me to clean and prepare them. The meat did not look anything like the ordinary cuts we typically consume. It was incredibly soft. Remarkably fresh, too. It certainly appeared as though it had been butchered and harvested just moments before. Yet I could not identify what kind of meat it was, precisely because of its unusual softness. Regardless, it was my job, and I proceeded to do it. However, as I was cleaning the meat, my intuition kept telling me that something was terribly wrong. I was overcome by a sense of nausea, a distinct urge to vomit. This sensation was particularly acute when I was cleaning the entrails and liver, specifically while I was purging the filth from within them. They did not resemble the organs of any ordinary animal I had ever seen. Nevertheless, I carried on with the task. Afterward, I was instructed to chop vegetables. No matter how hard I tried to focus my attention on other tasks, I simply could not escape the lingering scent of that meat, the smell of cleaning and preparing it, that seemed to cling to me. Consequently, I decided to skip lunch entirely. The following day, I was sent out along with a few other workers to gather specific items from the surrounding area. We were told that these items were required for a ritual intended to bring prosperity to the wealthy family we served. We were instructed to collect certain flowers and leaves needed for this ritual from a large mountain located nearby. So, accompanied by a few fellow workers, I set out to gather the requested supplies. We spent several hours scouring the entire island, collecting whatever items we could find along the way. It was then that I noticed something unusual. I heard a sudden commotion in the distance. When I turned to investigate the source of the noise, I witnessed one of the young women who had accompanied us jump into the sea in an apparent suicide attempt. I was utterly shocked by what I saw. Fortunately, some guards stationed nearby managed to rescue her before she could drown. I turned to my fellow workers and asked what had happened, but they all simply replied that they had no idea. Yet, a deep curiosity stirred within me. I felt an intense urge to understand what had transpired, why the young woman had acted in such a manner, and where they had taken her after her rescue. The next day, once our work was finished, we returned to the mansion. However, thoughts of that young woman and wondering what had become of her kept running through my mind. The following day arrived, and once again I was assigned the very same task, the gruesome work of cleaning and preparing the meat. It was then that I heard a noise. Stepping outside to investigate, I saw small children playing within the mansion. All these children appeared to be under the age of 10, certainly no older than that. While most of the children roaming the mansion were dressed in ordinary clothes, I encountered something truly shocking. A few of them were running around and playing while wearing nothing but bikinis. I was utterly appalled by this sight. I called out to the children and told them, "You should dress properly while you play. There are strangers present here." As I was speaking to the children, the security guards spotted me. The moment they saw me, they rushed over to my location with alarming speed. I screamed and pleaded desperately. I insisted that I had done nothing wrong, that I had merely offered those few words of advice to the children, and I tried my utmost to explain and justify my actions. However, no matter how much I explained or offered clarifications, it seemed to fall on deaf ears. Finally, one of the guards, a security officer, struck me across the face with a brutal, open-handed slap while I was still speaking. The force of the blow was so severe that I immediately lost consciousness and collapsed. When I regained consciousness and opened my eyes, I found myself confined within a prison cell deep underground. The entire place was shrouded in darkness. I could not comprehend what was happening to me. I was utterly shocked, struggling to believe that I had been subjected to such punishment simply for speaking to a child. I felt an overwhelming urge to weep bitterly, and their mistreatment did not end there. They haven't given me any food for 3 days. I was completely drained from 3 days of hunger. Water was my only sustenance, after being held in prison for 3 days without food. On the 3rd day, they gave me something to eat. Its smell was incredibly strange, utterly repulsive. Visually, it looked exactly like human waste. Upon seeing it, I recoiled in disgust and flung it away. At that moment, I heard a sound coming from the adjacent cell. It was the voice of the young woman who had attempted suicide by drowning herself in the sea. I called out to her, asking, "What is going on here? What is the reason behind all this turmoil and suffering we are being put through?" The terrified young woman gave me a single chilling answer. "Everyone here is a demon, a monster. The food they consume, that meat, is not the flesh of ordinary animals. It is human flesh." When she said that, I looked at the food again. It was indeed the flesh of small children, little boys and girls. They were eating the meat of children. Hearing this sent a shudder through my entire body. I was overcome by a profound sense of shock and horror. I immediately vomited right there on the spot. Then she warned me, "Listen, this is no ordinary place. This is hell." I was seized by overwhelming terror, screaming, "Let me out! Let me out!" I thrashed about and cried out until I felt as though I would lose my life. Hearing my screams, the guards rushed in and beat me mercilessly until I lost consciousness. I sustained injuries across my body, and blood flowed from my wounds. Unable to bear the excruciating pain any longer, I collapsed right there on the floor and passed out. I have absolutely no recollection of what happened after that. Between hunger and unconsciousness, I remained lying there in that cell for 7 long days. Consequently, driven by the need to save myself from the delirium of starvation, I found myself compelled, despite my aversion, to consume the food they offered. However, I could not finish it. After eating little more than half, I began to vomit. I prayed to God, begging him to somehow rescue me from this living hell. I reflected on how this single mistake, committed unwittingly out of a desire for money, had utterly destroyed my very beauty. Yet I held on to the hope that God would surely hear my plea and grant me forgiveness. The following day, they released me from confinement. My body was covered in wounds and I could barely walk. Nevertheless, I remained fiercely determined that if I were granted even a single opportunity to save my life, I would seize it without hesitation. They dragged me, literally dragged me, to another location. Inside, amidst carcasses of various animals, they shoved me into a freezer room. What I witnessed there was something no human being should ever have to see. Hanging all around me were human remains, human bodies. The severed limbs and torsos of human beings hung suspended from hooks. At the sight of this, I felt the urge to vomit once again. Yet I did not even have the time to give in to my body's reaction. They ordered me to handle the meat, to cut and prepare the carcasses. I refused. How could I possibly touch such things? I cried out. I adamantly insisted that I could not, that I simply would not do it. In response, they beat me once more, inflicting fresh injuries upon my already battered body. I was too weak to fight back. I possessed neither the strength nor the energy to resist. Consequently, I resigned myself to their will and began to do exactly as they commanded. It was then that I overheard fragments of a conversation taking place nearby. They were conversing, saying that certain rituals were scheduled to take place that very day. Not stopping at mere conversation, they immediately decided to head out together. The two of them then departed for an undisclosed location. Suspecting that they were likely going there to retrieve something specific, and devising whatever means I could to verify this, I decided to follow them. The path led to an underground tunnel. Traversing the subterranean passage, they eventually arrived at a specific chamber, a place shrouded in a thick, smoke-like mist. The smoke was immense in volume. Towering high within it stood a massive idol. This idol bore the head of a buffalo, complete with 2 large horns. It appeared to be seated upon a throne, holding a symbolic emblem or sign in its hand. I did not know what name to give to this idol. Many people, a large crowd, had gathered around it. Each of them wore a mask over their face. They were clad in peculiar garments adorned with strange serpentine patterns. I remained hidden, silently observing everything that unfolded. In the center of the chamber stood an altar designated for human sacrifice. A masked figure approached the altar and offered his obeisance. He held a vessel in his hand. As he raised the vessel to present it to the idol and then lowered it again, I took a closer look. It contained a thick, viscous substance. That entire substance was blood. They all proceeded to drink that blood, falling into a state of intoxication. Their leader then used that very blood to bestow his blessings upon the entire gathering. It was at that moment that I noticed yet another astonishing sight. A newborn infant within that very chamber. An infant was brought in. The moment I laid eyes on that baby, my entire body began to tremble uncontrollably. The reason was simple. I had no idea what they intended to do. They were preparing to offer that innocent infant as a sacrifice to the devil. Just as I had feared, the leader, who had received the child, lifted it high in front of the statue of Satan. Witnessing all of this, I burst into tears. I resolved then and there that I had to escape this place by any means necessary. Weeping bitterly, I retraced my steps back along the path I had taken to get there. I fled through the tunnel, praying that it would eventually lead somewhere safe. My hopes were not in vain. At the end of the passage, I discovered an exit leading out into the open. It was only as I stepped through that exit that I realized where I was. I looked around and saw that the open area was filled with numerous helicopters. I climbed aboard one of them. Taking care not to be seen by anyone, I hid myself in a secluded spot at the rear of the helicopter. However, due to my physical exhaustion, I immediately lost consciousness. I do not know how long, whether for hours or days, I remained in that state of unconsciousness. Suddenly, someone woke me up. When I came to, I rose in sheer terror for my life. It was the captain piloting the helicopter who had roused me. The moment I saw him, I was overcome with fear and began to weep. "For God's sake, please save me! Please forgive me! I acted out of ignorance," I pleaded, falling to my knees and begging him for mercy. The captain ordered me to remain in hiding and attended to my needs. Thanks to his assistance, I escaped the clutches of that devil. The one condition he imposed upon me was this: do not tell this story to anyone. Do not reveal to anyone that I saved your life. If this secret were to leak out, not only would your life be in danger, but mine would be as well. If we are both to survive, please, do not speak of this to a living soul. He urged me not to give him cause to regret having saved me, and then ensured I was safely sequestered. I gave him my solemn word, promising that I would never divulge this matter to anyone. Furthermore, he extended a monumental favor to me. He gave me a sum of money and arranged for my departure. He issued a stern warning. Do not, under any circumstances, attempt to make contact with anyone else. I must tell you now, what I have just recounted constitutes barely half of the torment I endured. The only reason I am speaking of this now is that the secrets surrounding Epstein have already begun to surface. Do not place your trust in anyone, especially those who hold power over you. They are not human beings, they are devils. If at any point hereafter I should meet my end, rest assured there can be only one explanation for it. Until we meet again for another story, I bid you farewell,